It started on a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind of day when grief sits heavy in the air, clinging to every sound, every breath. My mother's funeral had been just 2 days before, and the house still smelled like lilies and rain. I hadn't planned to go through her things so soon, but something kept pulling me toward the attic, that narrow staircase with creaky steps and dust thick enough to write a lifetime of stories in. Each step felt like walking deeper into the past, her past. Up there, among old photo albums and faded Christmas decorations, I found a wooden box, small, polished, and locked. My mother's handwriting was carved faintly on the top, E.H. Her initials, and mine. I hesitated, fingers trembling, before breaking the tiny brass latch. Inside were letters, dozens of them, tied with a red ribbon. The paper was yellowed with age, the ink a deep blue that bled softly at the edges. I thought they were between her and my father, but when I unfolded the first one, my heart stilled. It wasn't addressed to my dad. The name written in her elegant cursive was someone I had never heard before. To Daniel. The words that followed felt like a door opening into a world I was never meant to see. My dearest Daniel, I dream of you every night. I froze. The letter continued, memories of long drives, secret meetings by the pier, promises whispered under the stars. Each sentence chipped away at the image of the woman I thought I knew. My mother, the devoted wife, the one who made Sunday pancakes and tucked me in at night, had loved someone else. I sank onto the attic floor, the wood cold beneath my knees, the letter trembling in my hand. My chest ached with something I couldn't name. Betrayal, sadness, maybe even jealousy. Had her whole life been a lie? I opened another letter, then another, each one more tender, more intimate than the last. And somewhere between the lines, I found the truth that terrified me the most. These weren't old letters. The last one was dated just 6 months ago. She'd been writing to him until the end. I sat there, surrounded by her secrets, listening to the house groan under the weight of time. Outside, the wind brushed against the window, soft, almost like her voice. And for the first time, I whispered to the empty room, "Who are you, Daniel?" That night, I couldn't sleep. Every memory of my mother replayed in fragments. Her laughter, her stories about my father, her eyes when she said she loved us. And now, all of it felt like a puzzle missing its centerpiece. Was Daniel the reason for her distant smiles? Or had he been her one regret? I didn't know yet, but I was going to find out, even if the truth broke everything I believed about her and about myself. I woke up the next morning with the sun cutting through my curtains and a knot in my stomach that hadn't been there before. On the table beside me lay the box of letters, like a secret waiting to swallow me whole. I couldn't decide if I hated her for hiding it or loved her even more for being so human. I made coffee, black, the way she liked it, and sat by the window. The letters spread out like evidence of another life. Daniel. That name echoed in my mind all morning. Who was he? A friend? A lover? A ghost from her past? I searched every letter for clues, addresses, dates, anything that could tell me who he was. But my mother was careful, too careful. Her words were filled with longing, but never names of places or details that could betray her secret. You were my peace when the world turned cruel. Your letters are the only place I can breathe. Lines like these made my chest ache in ways I couldn't explain. I thought of my father, quiet, reserved, always lost in his work. Did he know? Was their silence in the last few years really just silence? Or was it the sound of two people holding a truth too heavy to say aloud? That evening, I opened her wardrobe, the one that still smelled faintly of lavender and old perfume. Behind her winter coats, I found a shoebox tucked away under folded scarves. Inside, more letters, photographs, and one small envelope with my name written in her hand. For Emma. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. It wasn't a letter, not really, just a single line written in her delicate cursive. If you ever find Daniel, tell him I kept my promise. I stared at the words until they blurred through tears. What promise? And why did it feel like my mother was still speaking to me through them? For the first time, I wondered if Daniel was still alive. And if he was, did he know she was gone? Something deep inside me whispered that he deserved to know. But another part of me, the hurt daughter, wanted to bury this secret and never speak of it again. That night, I sat on my bed, surrounded by her handwriting, her scent, her ghost, and whispered into the silence, "Why didn't you tell me, Mom?" The room didn't answer, only the faint hum of the night. Then I saw it, a tiny slip of paper tucked between two letters I hadn't read yet. It was a receipt from a cafe in Charleston dated 6 months ago. Her handwriting was on the back. Our place, always 4 p.m. My heartbeat quickened. That's where she had met him, not decades ago, but recently. I had grown up thinking my mother's story ended quietly, but maybe, just maybe, it was still echoing in the city she left behind. I packed the letters, the photo, and that one receipt. If I wanted answers, I had to find Daniel, and I knew exactly where to start. 2 days later, I was on the road to Charleston. The letters sat beside me on the passenger seat, tied with that same red ribbon, the only link between my mother's world and mine. The city skyline rose against the morning light, familiar yet distant, like a memory I wasn't sure belonged to me anymore. The cafe from the receipt was still there, tucked between an old bookstore and a florist with wild daisies spilling from the window boxes. The Seabird Cafe. Its sign creaked softly in the wind, as if whispering a name I was about to remember. Inside, everything smelled like cinnamon and coffee. Warm, comforting, ordinary, except for the ache that sat heavy in my chest. I ordered a coffee, sat near the window, and looked around. Maybe she sat right here, 6 months ago, writing one of those letters. As I was leaving, a soft voice stopped me. "You look just like her." I turned. An elderly woman stood by the counter, her eyes kind but studying me carefully. "I'm sorry?" I asked, and she smiled faintly. "Margaret Hale, that was your mother, wasn't it?" My breath caught. "You knew her?" She nodded slowly. "Everyone knew Margaret. She used to come here every Thursday, always at 4, always alone, until..." She hesitated. "Until he came." My heart beat fast in my ears. "Daniel?" I whispered. The woman's eyes softened. "So you know." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I only nodded, afraid my voice would break the fragile quiet between us. "He still comes here," she said, pouring another cup of coffee. "Sits at the same corner table, always at 4. My pulse quickened. "He's still alive?" She smiled sadly. "Alive, yes, but living? I'm not sure." That day, I waited. The clock ticked softly towards 4, each second stretching longer than the last. When the door finally opened, I almost didn't breathe. A man in his 60s walked in, tall, silver hair, gentle eyes that carried too many winters. He ordered black coffee, no sugar, the same way my mother liked it. He sat at the corner, looking out the window, and for a moment I saw it. The ghost of her smile reflected in his silence. That was Daniel. I wanted to speak, but fear wrapped around my throat. What would I even say? I'm Margaret's daughter? You're the man she wrote to in secret? Every word felt too small for the truth sitting between us. But when he turned, when his eyes met mine, I knew. He recognized me. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then he whispered, barely audible, "Emma?" The way he said my name made my chest tighten, like he had said it 1,000 times before, in memories I didn't have. "You know who I am?" I asked softly. He nodded, his voice trembling. "She told me about you. Every letter, every story. She loved you more than anything." He paused, tears glistening in his eyes. "And she loved me enough to let me go." I sat across from him, silent, heart aching with both understanding and confusion. For the first time, I wasn't angry. I just wanted to know her. The woman she was before she was my mother. "Will you tell me about her?" Daniel smiled, a small, broken smile that carried years of love and loss. "I think she'd like that." And as the evening light spilled across the table, he began to tell me the story she never could. The cafe had grown quiet by the time Daniel began to speak. The sun had lowered behind the buildings, painting the room an amber light, soft, like memory. He stirred his coffee once, twice, then set the spoon down gently, as if afraid the sound might break what was left of the past. "Your mother and I met long before you were born," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years. "It was the summer of 1986. She was 22 and already promised to someone else." My heart clenched. "My father." He nodded slowly. "Yes." "She used to come here to write," Daniel continued. "One day she spilled her coffee on my sketchbook. We laughed. It was nothing, and yet everything." He smiled faintly, lost in the memory. "We talked for hours about books, about music, about the kind of life we wanted but didn't know how to reach." His eyes softened. "She said I made her feel seen." He paused, his gaze distant. "But she was loyal. Even when she knew she loved me, she wouldn't leave him. She said vows meant something." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat impossible to hide. "So you stopped seeing her?" I asked. Daniel looked down. "For a time, yes. But some people, they find their way back to each other, even when the world tells them not to." His words lingered like smoke between us. "Years later," he said, "after your father fell ill, she came back. Not for romance, not for secrets, but for comfort. She said she needed a friend who remembered her before life became duty." I could almost see her then, my mother sitting right where I was, with her quiet smile and trembling hands, speaking softly to this man she could never have. It wasn't betrayal anymore. It was longing, humanity, something fragile and beautiful, and terribly sad. "She never stopped loving your father," Daniel said. "But love isn't always one story. Sometimes it's chapters that never got to end." I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in, each one soft and sharp at the same time. "Why did she keep writing to you?" I asked. Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. A picture of the two of them standing by the ocean, young and laughing, their hands barely touching. "Because she made me a promise," he whispered, "that we'd write until one of us couldn't anymore. No meetings, no goodbyes, just letters, so we'd always know the other was still in the world. My eyes filled with tears. She kept her promise. He nodded. I know. Her last letter came 6 months ago. He looked at me, his voice trembling. She said she was tired, but happy, that she finally felt at peace watching you live the life she once dreamed of. I couldn't hold back anymore. Tears spilled freely down my cheeks. All the anger, confusion, and hurt I had carried since she found those letters dissolved into something softer, gratitude maybe, or forgiveness. Did she ever say why she never told me? Daniel smiled gently. She said some truths are meant to be found, not given. She wanted you to understand love, not judge it. Outside, the sky had turned violet. The city hummed quietly, alive, endless, forgiving. Daniel placed the photograph on the table and slid it toward me. Keep it, he said. She'd want you to have it. I traced the edges of the photo with my fingers. My mother, smiling, alive in a way I'd never seen her before. That night, as I drove back to my hotel, I watched the city lights blur through my tears. For the first time since she died, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt closer to her than ever. Because maybe the people we love don't leave us. Maybe they just teach us how to keep finding them in stories, in letters, and in the hearts of those who once held them. The next morning, the ocean felt different. The waves didn't crash, they whispered. Maybe that's how peace arrives, not all at once, but in pieces, carried quietly by the tide. I drove back to my mother's house, the one that still smelled faintly of her perfume, a mix of lavender and rain. I brought the letters with me, every one of them, tied again with that red ribbon she had once touched. There was one envelope left unopened, one she had hidden at the bottom of the box. It was addressed to me. For Emma, it said in her familiar handwriting, soft and certain. I held my breath as I broke the seal. Her words were simple, but they cut through every wall I had built around my heart. My darling girl, it began. By the time you read this, I hope you've learned that love isn't always what it looks like from the outside. I have made mistakes, but loving Daniel was not one of them. He reminded me that even after loss, after pain, after promises that broke us, the heart can still choose to feel. I paused, tears falling onto the page. Her handwriting wavered slightly, like she had written it through shaking hands. I stayed with your father because love also means keeping promises. It means showing up, even when the story doesn't go your way. Daniel was my beginning, your father was my middle, and you, Emma, you were my forever. I pressed the letter to my chest, the paper warm against my skin from my tears and heartbeat. All this time I had been searching for who my mother really was, when the answer had been there all along. She was a woman who loved deeply, even when it hurt, who stayed even when her heart was elsewhere, who gave even when she had nothing left for herself. That night, I drove to the edge of the pier, the same one she had written about in her letters. The wind tugged at my hair, the sea glittering under the moonlight like pieces of broken glass finding their way home. I untied the red ribbon, opened the box, and let the letters go, one by one, into the waves. Each page floated for a moment before sinking gently beneath the surface, as if the ocean was keeping them safe, as if she was still there, whispering goodbye. I stood there for a long time until the tide reached my feet, cool and forgiving. I forgive you, Mom, I whispered, for what you hid, for what you lost, for what you loved. And in that moment, I forgave myself too. Because the truth was never about betrayal or secrets. It was about love. Wild, complicated, unfinished love. And maybe that's the kind of love that lasts forever. As I turned to leave, the first light of dawn touched the horizon, soft and golden. I smiled through my tears, feeling her with me. And for the first time since she was gone, I didn't feel empty. I felt whole. Some stories don't end when we close the book. They echo, quietly, beautifully, in the hearts that keep remembering. And mine will always remember her.